It was Christmas Eve, and the evening sun cast a golden glow on the city streets. The sound of children's laughter echoed as families decorated their homes, preparing for a joyful holiday. But in one mansion at the edge of the neighborhood, a darker story was unfolding. Tamara stood in her kitchen, her hands trembling as she carefully mixed the poison into the food. She had been planning this for months. Every day, she smiled at her childhood best friend, Tyra, pretending all was well, but deep inside, the storm raged. Her heart had turned to stone. Tamara had always been the one who was fast, the one who succeeded. Tyra, her best friend, was never meant to surpass her. Yet, as the years went by, it was Tyra who had flourished. Tyra's boutique had turned into a chain of successful stores, while Tamara's life had unraveled. Her husband, once a wealthy businessman, had lost his job. The mansion they lived in was now too big for their shrinking family, and their children, once enrolled in the finest schools, were now going to places much cheaper. Tamara could no longer stand the sight of her once closest friend, who seemed to have it all, while she sank deeper into bitterness and envy. And so, the plan was set. On this night, she would end it all. Tyra and her family would dine on a meal laced with poison, and Tamara would watch as everything she hated crumbled. But what Tamara didn't know was that Tyra's husband, Nathan, had already begun to notice the subtle changes in their friendship. Tamara's kindness now felt too forced, too fake. As the clock ticked down, Tamara placed the poisoned food into containers and prepared to make her visit. Tyra and Tamara had been inseparable for as long as they could remember. They grew up in the same neighborhood, shared the same schoolyard, and spent hours playing under the shade of the old oak tree that stood in front of their childhood homes. From the moment they met as young girls, they forged a bond unlike any other. Tamara had always been the leader, the one who made decisions, while Tyra was content to follow. Tamara was always the most popular, the most admired, and the one who won every race, every competition. Tyra, with her quiet strength, would often let Tamara win, knowing how much it meant to her friend. Though she never said it, Tyra admired Tamara's confidence. She was proud of her, even when Tamara's boastful nature started to grow. In their final year of school, Tamara's belief in her own superiority became even more pronounced. She was certain that she would always be ahead, that no one could ever eclipse her shine. And so, when Tamara went off to university, she was sure she would emerge victorious. She was sure of everything, but what she never considered was that Tyra would become something more than just a side character in her story. After university, Tamara's life unfolded exactly as she'd dreamed. She married a wealthy man, a businessman with connections, and settled into a life of luxury. She stopped working, embraced the role of a housewife, and devoted herself to her family. Tyra, on the other hand, was still chasing her dreams. She had no rich husband to rely on, no luxury cars or designer clothes. Tyra worked tirelessly at various jobs, always searching for an opportunity that would change her life. She refused to give up. Every rejection only fueled her determination to prove that she could make something of herself, even without the fortune that Tamara had. Tyra's heart was full of love for her best friend, and though she could sense the subtle differences in their lives, she never held them against Tamara. She wanted to believe that Tamara's happiness was all that mattered. But the day Tyra walked to Tamara's mansion to share the news of her latest job rejection, she could feel the distance growing. Tamara's eyes flickered with something Tyra couldn't place. It was envy, though Tyra couldn't understand why. Tamara's life seemed perfect. Tyra, on the other hand, was struggling. But that day, as she shared her disappointment, Tamara's smile was more than just friendly, it was calculating. Tamara introduced Tyra to one of her husband's wealthy friends, a successful businessman who happened to be their neighbor. And that, Tyra believed, was the turning point. Tyra's heart skipped a bit when she first met Marcus. He was charming, with a successful business of his own, and he seemed genuinely interested in her. When they started dating, Tyra couldn't believe her luck. For the first time, someone had noticed her, and not for her beauty or her charm, but for her intelligence and hard work. With Marcus's encouragement, Tyra opened a small boutique. It wasn't easy at first, but Tyra poured her heart and soul into it. The business slowly gained traction, and within a year, it had grown into something much bigger than she had ever imagined. She opened multiple branches across the city, each one a symbol of her dedication and resilience. And Tamara, once so proud and confident, began to watch from afar. At first, she congratulated Tyra, masking her envy with polite smiles. But deep inside, Tamara was seething. Tyra, the girl who had always let her win, was now winning at life, and Tamara couldn't handle it. Tamara's resentment began to simmer beneath the surface, a slow burn that only grew with each passing day. Tyra never saw it coming. She had always loved Tamara with all her heart, treating her like family, always there to listen when Tamara vented about her life. But the more Tyra succeeded, the colder Tamara became. It was subtle at first. Tamara's once sweet smile now seemed forced, her compliments hollow. Tyra, too busy with her own life, didn't notice the change. But soon, it became undeniable. Tamara's children, once enrolled in private schools, now attended public ones. The life she had so carefully crafted for herself was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Her husband's fall from grace was something she could not accept. The mansion that once symbolized success now felt like a prison. Tyra, on the other hand, was flourishing. Her children played with Tamara's, both families living close by, but what Tyra didn't realize was that the once thriving friendship was slowly dying. Tamara would wave at her from the window, smile through clenched teeth, and pretend everything was fine. But inside, she was plotting. Tamara's life was spiraling out of control. Her husband, a shadow of his former self, turned to alcohol to drown his sorrows. The man who had once supported her dreams now stumbled home every evening, drunk and broken. Tamara felt trapped, her world shrinking while Tyra's expanded. The envy consumed her, feeding on her pride. She began to resent everything about Tyra, the way her children always had the latest toys, the way her family lived in luxury, the way Tyra seemed to effortlessly glide through life. Tamara hated the way her best friend's success highlighted her own failures. She began to see Tyra not as a friend, but as an enemy, one that needed to be brought down. And so, she devised her plan. On Christmas Eve, the night when everyone was supposed to celebrate the season of goodwill, Tamara's heart was filled with bitterness. She had prepared a meal for Tyra and her family, knowing it would be their last supper together. She cooked with a steady hand, carefully adding the poison to each dish. It would all end tonight. As she finished the meal, she smiled to herself, imagining the look of shock on Tyra's face when the food was served. She had been the one to introduce Tyra to this world, to the life she was now living. And now, it was time for Tamara to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. But little did Tamara know, Tyra's husband had already begun to see through her facade. Nathan, Tyra's husband, had always been cautious, even when he appeared to trust people fully. Over the years, he had observed Tamara's behavior more closely than Tyra ever did. He could tell something was off. At first, it was subtle, the way Tamara would smile a little too brightly, the way her eyes narrowed when she saw Tyra enjoying the success that Tamara had once imagined for herself. Nathan had brushed it off at first, thinking it was just a phase. But the tension had only grown. On the evening of Christmas Eve, as they prepared for the family dinner, Nathan found himself unusually anxious. He hadn't told Tyra his feelings, afraid it would hurt her, but tonight, something gnawed at him. Tamara's generosity seemed too perfect, too staged. So, in a moment of doubt, he decided to feed the dog first with a small portion of the meal she had brought over. Within minutes, the dog began to show signs of distress, retching and stumbling around. Alarmed, Nathan quickly rushed the dog to the vet, but by then, the damage had been done. The vet confirmed that the animal had ingested poison. Nathan's heart sank as he connected the dots. Tamara, in her jealousy and bitterness, had poisoned the food. His mind raced as he realized that his entire family could be next. He had to act fast. As the clock ticked closer to dinner time, Nathan returned home, his face pale with fear. He hadn't told Tyra anything yet, but as they set the table, his anxiety was palpable. He couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth just yet. He needed proof, something more concrete to confront Tamara with. Tamara had already arrived, smiling as always, oblivious to Nathan's suspicions. Tyra greeted her friend warmly, happy to spend the evening together. As they all sat down to eat, Tamara's smile faltered for a brief second, but she quickly recovered, pretending everything was normal. "Is everything okay, Nathan?" Tyra asked, sensing something was off with her husband. Nathan hesitated. "I'm fine," he said, trying to appear calm, but his eyes were glued to Tamara, watching her every move. Tamara didn't seem to notice the tension, but Nathan was certain now. He had seen enough. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something much darker. Nathan couldn't wait any longer. He stood up abruptly, startling everyone at the table. "Tamara," he said, his voice cold, "I know what you did." For a moment, there was silence. Tamara's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly regained her composure, trying to play it off. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning innocence. "I know you poisoned the food," Nathan said, his voice steady but full of fury. "I saw what you did to the dog." The room went still. Tyra, confused and alarmed, looked between her husband and her childhood friend. Tamara's face twisted with anger, and her hand trembled as she clenched it into a fist. "You think I would do that?" Tamara's voice was sharp, but her words faltered. "I did this for you. I helped you." Tyra, still in shock, stood up. "What are you talking about, Tamara? You helped me? You're trying to kill us." Tamara's eyes flashed with rage. "You think you're better than me, don't you? You think I should be happy to watch you live the life I wanted? I was the one who introduced you to all of this. And now, you've taken everything from me." Tyra's heart ached as she listened to Tamara's bitter words. She had never thought that her success would hurt her friend so deeply. She had always loved Tamara, but now, the truth was clear. Tamara's jealousy had festered into something far more dangerous. "Tamara, I never wanted to take anything from you," Tyra said softly, her voice breaking. "I wanted to help you, to be there for you. But you've let this hatred consume you." Tamara's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of regret. They were tears of rage, of a woman who had lost everything she thought she deserved. She had been blind to the truth for so long, and now she was lost in her own bitterness. Tyra's heart shattered as she realized the depth of Tamara's pain. But she also knew that Tamara had gone too far. The poisoning, the hatred, it was no longer just about envy. It was about revenge, a need to destroy the one person she had once called a friend. Tamara stood up, backing away from the table. "You don't deserve any of this," she spat, her voice hoarse. "You've always been the second-rate friend, the one who had to follow in my shadow. But now I'll show you who's really in control." Before anyone could stop her, Tamara stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The tension in the room was unbearable. Tyra collapsed into Nathan's arms, her mind swelling with disbelief. How had it come to this? Nathan's face was grim. "We need to call the police, Tyra. She's dangerous." But Tyra's heart ached. She had never wanted this. She had only wanted to share her life with Tamara, to help her when she was struggling. Now, she was forced to face the consequences of her friend's actions. The police arrived at the house shortly after, questioning everyone involved. Tamara was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance was as swift as her betrayal. It wasn't long before authorities began investigating her background, her struggles, her feelings of inadequacy, her downward spiral into bitterness and resentment. They discovered that she had been planning the poisoning for weeks, ever since Tyra's business had taken off. The realization that Tamara had been hiding her true feelings for so long was staggering. Tyra, devastated and in disbelief, worked with the authorities to ensure that her family was safe. Tamara's dark intentions had been thwarted, but it didn't erase the years of friendship, the years of laughter and love, that had now been overshadowed by treachery. Tyra had always believed in the power of friendship, but in that moment, she understood that not all friendships were meant to last. Not all friendships could survive the weight of envy, pride, and jealousy. Days turned into weeks, and Tamara's whereabouts remained unknown. She had vanished, leaving behind only the wreckage of her actions. Tyra, still reeling from the betrayal, tried to move on with her life. She focused on her family, her business, and the life she had built for herself. But the pain of losing Tamara, her best friend, lingered. Tyra couldn't help but wonder what went wrong, why Tamara had let her own insecurities tear them apart. She had always believed that their bond was unbreakable, but now it seemed as fragile as glass. Tyra couldn't forgive Tamara, not for what she had done, but for the life they could never have together again. The days of laughter, of friendship, were now memories, and Tyra had to let go. But the wound would never fully heal. Tamara's life was a mess. She had nowhere to go, no one left to turn to. Her family had fallen apart, and her bitterness had destroyed the very thing she had once held dear, her friendship with Tyra. Her jealousy had blinded her, and now, she was left alone in the darkness of her choices. In her quiet moments, Tamara thought about the past, the moments when she and Tyra had been inseparable, when life had been simple and full of promise. But now, all she had was regret. Tamara knew she could never undo the damage she had caused. And as the weight of her actions bore down on her, she realized that no amount of success could bring back the one thing she had truly lost, the love and trust of her best friend. It was Christmas again, a year after the betrayal. Tyra spent the holiday with her family, surrounded by the warmth and joy of the season. But a part of her still mourned the loss of Tamara, the friend she had once cherished. As the year passed, Tyra continued to build her life, her business, and her family. She knew that she couldn't change the past, but she could move forward. Tamara, wherever she was, would remain a distant memory, a shadow of a time long gone. And in the quiet moments, when Tyra watched her children laugh and play, she couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of peace. Tamara had been a part of her story, but her story had to go on without her. As time passed, the pain from the betrayal began to fade for Tyra, but it never fully left her heart. She focused on her family and business, but the questions surrounding Tamara lingered. What had driven her childhood friend to such drastic measures? What could have been done to stop it? Despite everything, Tyra still held a small, flickering hope that Tamara would return, if only to apologize, to make amends for the terrible mistake she had made. But as the months went by, Tamara remained elusive, a shadow that haunted Tyra's every thought. The police had found no trace of her. Tamara had seemingly disappeared from the world. In her heart, Tyra knew that the woman who had once been her closest companion was likely lost to her forever. Still, Tyra couldn't completely erase the memories of their friendship, the long talks, the shared dreams, the laughter. She decided to do something that she never thought she would. Tyra reached out to Tamara's family, trying to understand what had happened to her. Had she gone off to start a new life? Or had the weight of her guilt been too much for her to bear? The response from Tamara's parents was heartbreaking. They, too, were lost, mourning the daughter they once knew, the bright, confident woman who had fallen so far into darkness. They told Tyra that they hadn't heard from her in months, and the last they knew, Tamara had been living on the streets, consumed by her own self-loathing and regret. Tyra's heart broke again. She knew Tamara wasn't beyond redemption. But had Tamara lost all hope for herself? Was it too late to rebuild a life from the ashes of her past mistakes? One rainy evening, as Tyra sat alone in her study, her thoughts weighed heavy. A knock on the door startled her. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Standing on the doorstep was none other than Tamara. Her once vibrant, confident best friend now looked like a shadow of herself. Her clothes were ragged, and her face showed the signs of a long and difficult struggle. Tamara's eyes, once so full of ambition and pride, were now hollow, filled with sorrow and regret. "Tyra," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go." Tyra stood frozen, torn between anger and sympathy. After everything Tamara had done, how could she just show up like this? Yet, Tyra couldn't deny the pain she saw in her eyes. She had always been there for Tamara, and part of her still wanted to be there now. Without saying a word, Tyra stepped aside, allowing Tamara into her home. The two women stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything that had transpired between them filling the room. "I've made so many mistakes, Tyra," Tamara began, her voice breaking. I was consumed by jealousy, and I thought I could make it all go away. I poisoned you, and I almost killed your family. I've never been so lost." Tyra's eyes filled with tears as she listened to the woman she had once called her best friend. The anger she had felt in the past began to dissolve, replaced by a deep, aching sorrow. "You should have never done that," Tyra said softly, her voice shaky. "But I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did." Tamara nodded, understanding. She had never expected forgiveness, but hearing those words from Tyra was like a knife to her heart. She had destroyed the one person who had always been there for her, and now she was left with nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, Tamara said, her voice barely audible. I needed you to know how sorry I am. I've been living with the guilt every day. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. I don't want to be this person anymore, Tyra. I don't know where to start. Tyra wiped away a tear, her heart conflicted. She had never imagined that one day, Tamara would come to her like this, broken and seeking redemption. But could she let go of the past? Could she allow herself to forgive the woman who had once been her closest friend? Tamara stayed with Tyra that night, her presence a painful reminder of all the betrayal, but also a sign of something else, perhaps a chance for redemption, a chance to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, Tyra knew that. Forgiveness wasn't something that could happen overnight, especially after what Tamara had done. But the wounds of the past were not just hers to bear. Tamara had to face them too. The next few weeks were filled with difficult conversations, tears, and uncomfortable silences. Tamara slowly began to rebuild her life, starting from the ground up. She sought counseling to understand the root of her jealousy and bitterness, trying to find out what had made her so angry, so consumed with the need to one-up her best friend. Tyra, while still deeply hurt, allowed herself to heal as well. She didn't immediately forgive Tamara, but she opened her heart to the possibility. They both knew that healing was a long and difficult journey, one that neither of them could rush. During this time, Tamara made efforts to show Tyra that she was committed to changing, to making amends. She sought work, though it was a humbling experience for her. Her former life of luxury seemed like a distant memory, but it was the price she had to pay for her actions. At first, Tyra was hesitant to bring Tamara back into her family's life. But as she watched her friend struggle, truly struggle, to rebuild herself, something shifted inside her. She remembered the Tamara she had once known, the girl who had been kind and generous, the girl who had shared her dreams with her. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, the two women shared a quiet moment. Tyra watched as Tamara played with her children, her laughter genuine and free from the bitterness that had once clouded it. There was something different about her now, a softness, a vulnerability that had never been there before. Tamara turned to Tyra, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I never thought I'd get the chance to make things right," she said, her voice shaky. "But you gave me that chance. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the person you once believed I could be." Tyra smiled softly, her heart still healing but lighter than it had been in a long time. "You're not the person I thought you were, Tamara. But maybe that's okay. We both changed. And maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild something from the ruins of the past." In that moment, Tyra realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing the wrongs that had been done. It was about allowing healing to take place, about giving both herself and Tamara the chance to move forward, not as the women they once were, but as the women they were becoming. Months later, Tamara had found a modest job working at a local store. She had made amends with her family, slowly earning back their trust. She wasn't wealthy anymore, but she had found something far more valuable: peace. She had found a purpose in her own life, a life free from the need to compete with Tyra, a life grounded in humility and self-acceptance. Tyra, too, had learned to forgive, though the scars would always remain. She had rebuilt her friendship with Tamara, but it was no longer the same. The trust they had once shared had been shattered, but Tyra realized that some friendships could be reborn, even after the deepest betrayals. As they stood together, watching their children play, Tyra and Tamara knew that their paths had diverged and reconnected in ways neither had expected. They had both been tested, both broken and mended, and in the end, they had found a way to move forward, not as the women they were before, but as the women they had become, stronger, wiser, and capable of love in its truest, most forgiving form. And in that moment, beneath the sky that had seen so much of their pain and their joy, Tyra and Tamara knew that while the past could never be erased, the future was still theirs to shape. The bitter feast had ended, but their story was far from over. Did you enjoy the story? I hope so. Please like and share the video, drop your comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Thanks for watching and see you on the next.